episode of One Control Board Podcast, episode 363. I'm Benjamin Yoder here today for the final episode of 2024. It's that time. It's the Game of the Year episode where we go through a bunch of categories and talk about Game of the Year stuff and things like that. So, usually we don't look, man, I don't play enough modern games, especially this year. I did not play nearly as much modern games as I'd like to. But you know, that's kind of what we're doing here. Or looking at video games as a whole, whether it is, this year or not typically. So our categories are generally geared towards just stuff I experienced this year. So, you know, these are my experiences really, at the end of the day. So if you're looking for a traditional Game of the Year show, probably not getting that here, but we're going to talk about stuff, and we got some little categories that are often kind of molded around whatever I played this year. And we also have some categories that you guys sent in as well. So very fun, very exciting. But before we get into that, I wanted to do two things. First, we are going to have a new podcast schedule next year. I mentioned it on the last show, but I think I was editing too many podcasts this year, and it was really it's starting to burn me out in a lot of different ways. Some of that is maybe a symptom of kind of the late part of the year where there's a lot of PCFX fan club podcasts that happened in a row. But I think at the end of the day, ultimately, trying to give myself more time, save myself more time is not going to hurt more than, you know, leaving more on the table kind of thing, I guess. So, we could always change this, who knows? But, currently, here's the plan. 1, the first Monday of every month, Hot Pot Gaming is going to happen. That's going to be normal for the most part. Just the day shifted back. You know, I think typically we're doing the last week of the month. It's going to be the first week of the month. Every Monday that is a part of that, for the first Monday of every month, basically. Shouldn't be any real changes there. So that is kind of as is. Then every third Monday of the month, we're going to have the One Control Port podcast happen. And then so basically alternate back and forth. One multi-tap podcast, or sorry, not multi-tap, Hot Pot Gaming podcast, and then one normal OCP podcast. So anyways, I appreciate your guys' patience with all this stuff. Hopefully that's not a devastating blow. But I'm also, along with this, I think we're going to try something a little different with the show. There are some things that I would like to consolidate from the channel into the show. Things like the pickups, we used to talk about those on the podcast forever ago, but we kind of stopped doing that. And then also, you know, we do the what's it called? The podcast highlights, where we edit some video to a game discussion. And the reason why we do that is because when we talk on the podcast, typically I don't have a way to show you a video game, right? So here's my thought. This may change. Just keep that in mind. I'm thinking this. I think we will return back to video podcasts. Now, you're going to be like, Ben, the reason you stopped that before is because it was too much work. And there's a lot of reasons why it was too much work. I think I have thought about this in a way where I don't think it will be that much work. And the reason why I want to do video podcasts is not for no reason. It's not just like, oh, I'm cutting it down, so therefore let me give you video. I think the reason I want to go back to doing a video podcast for this show is because I want to be able to show you guys the video games, because I think I'm going to be doing less game reviews on the OCP Plus channel. So I think the plan is that when I talk about a game on the podcast, that's probably where that review is going to live forever, rather than being kind of like the initial draft. And then when I do that video, I'm not editing in gameplay footage. I will probably have a share screen on screen, and we'll probably just pull up footage from the game and just have up whatever makes sense at that time. I think that's the plan. That also means for pickups, you know, I would also show you guys the pickups, you know, physically on screen here and all that stuff. So that's the thought. I will say, maybe I sit down and do this and go, wow, this is way more effort than I thought it'd be, and I don't want to do this when we go back to audio episodes, but I think I want to try that. So I think the first episode of the new year, that will be the plan. It'll be a video version. Ultimately, I'll try my best to talk about things in ways that make sense for audio only, just because I have no idea how many of you guys actually watch the podcast versus, just listen. Obviously, right now there's no video, so there's no watching to be had. But yeah, so that is going to be, I think, the plan. So, yes. Anyways, that's kind of it. I forget how much I mentioned before, but I kind of let the end of this year get out of control again. Basically, anything leading up to Portland Retro Game Expo and afterwards, I just wasn't giving myself time to live my life normally. And so it created a lot of problems. And that's something I'm sure I'm going to continue to struggle with. But one of the things I need to do with that is kind of ask questions of like, what is valuable and what is like something that I don't necessarily need to be presenting in the way I'm presenting it now. So, and I love doing everything that I do, but at the end of the day, I think it is better to de-emphasize the things that I think are less important to me. So that's the plan. So I think the OCP Plus channel, I'm not going to say there won't be other uploads on it, but I think primarily what you'll see in the short term is the alternating podcast back and forth. Anyway, so that's it for that. So just a reminder and all that, first Monday of the month will be Hot Pot Gaming. Third Monday will be One Controller Podcast. There's some months where that means there'll be like 3 weeks until the next month's episode, but whatever. I'm not gonna stress too much about it. So that's where we're at with that. Anyways, thank you guys. And also, if you don't like the new format of the show, let me know. I'll let you know. I'll try my best. This is a very tiny show, so ultimately, I'm probably gonna do more of what's best for me than anything else. So, but I would like to hear. Let me know. Anyways, the second thing I want to do before we get into Game of the Year is we have one final news story of the year, because this is a pretty big deal. And I don't think we've talked about this before. And it is very important. Of course, what can it be but an NFT news story? But the reason why. If you've been following me on this like crypto NFT journey while we try desperately to understand why Japanese companies continue to engage with this, you'll know that part of what originally started all this was that Million Arthur, a franchise that we followed and talked about off and on quite a bit, despite me never playing them. We followed Million Arthur pretty closely, and so when the Million Arthur NFTs launched and were successful, I think that was one big moment in us following NFT stuff, because we were like, oh, Million Arthur NFTs are actually like successful. And then they launched the Million Arthur NFT game, and then that game, last we talked about it, shut down. They couldn't really figure out how to get it to work. And yeah, that was the last I had really heard of it, with the intention at the time, from what I understand, was that the Million Arthur NFT games would, or NFTs would still continue to function as they were, but they would no longer have the video game associated with it. So now it sounds like they are finally killing off the rest of the Million Arthur NFT stuff. So basically, if you don't remember, with Million Arthur NFTs, you could basically create your own little character stickers, basically, little square stickers. If you ever seen like Japanese stickers that are like those little square characters, it looks a lot like that. And so you could basically choose like a base art, set different backgrounds and stuff, and create NFTs. You could, quote, press the NFT, as I think it was called. However, a news story I think I missed was in July, they basically said, hey, we're no longer going to let you guys press NFTs. So you can no longer create Million Arthur NFTs. So these NFTs were made up of multiple parts, and then you basically put them together to make your own sticker. And they basically said you have until October to print your final stickers, basically. Again, I missed all this stuff before, so all this stuff has been gone for a couple months now. And it sounds like they also, Double Jump Tokyo left the project as well back in June, specifically. So it sounds like Square Enix is the sole owner of this Million Arthur NFT project now going forward, and it sounds like they're shutting it down. However, one thing that they're also doing in this is that Square Enix is saying they want the assets to retain their value. Now, I think we always have the question of like, what is the value of an NFT And I think the answer, I'm going to guess, from Million Arthur is probably very little. I could be wrong. But I don't think there's probably a lot of value there. But the thing we talked about with Symbiosis Genesis, Square Enix's other NFT game, is that they've developed value through the information characters had, and then also retaining secrecy of that information to give players an edge, which then drove up value of certain characters who had certain information, kind of thing, right? That was kind of the value here. I never figured out the value of Million Arthur NFTs beyond just the art's cute, but then I kind of feel like everybody can just make their own NFT and choose a different background. I don't know. So there's never really was a part of this I understood, but they still technically have like an assigned value to them. I don't know what those current assigned values are, so who knows? But basically what they are saying is that what they're going to do. So if you pressed your NFT, you've pressed your NFT. So you have your little image NFT, right? However, those NFTs, the parts they are made up of, they are functionally useless now. Or maybe all NFTs are functionally useless, but in this case, in the concept of what they're doing, they are functionally useless. And so what they are doing is they basically are taking all those materials and they're converting it. And so they're converting it over to something called gear points. And those gear points you can basically take to other blockchains and try to utilize those for something. I don't understand the concept of gear points. That is a larger concept around NFTs. I have never seen that concept. And they do not give any examples of what to spend these gear points on, but they did say they expire within 180 days. So you have to do something with them quickly. And I just don't know what that is. I don't know if it just is like, like, hey, you can get cents on your next NFT or something like that, or fractions of a cent on your next NFT covered by gear point scores or whatever it's called. So I don't really understand why, but it seems like the blockchain that the Million Arthur was on does not actually accept these, so you have to do it on other blockchains. It's like called Dose or something like that, or Dosi. Anyways, but basically it seems like what they're saying is that this is an experiment to show how we can potentially use assets from a shutdown NFT project to extend the life of those assets into future games. Again, there's not really any examples of how you utilize this, so I don't understand what the value of these components are and how a user would use those. But it sounds like they are trying to do something with it, basically. So, the actual pressed NFTs, the ones that you actually like created an image for, those seem to continue to live on. You can trade them, however you want. And I assume the value of those is only based off the artistic value of the NFTs themselves, which again, they're made up of parts and things like that. So I really wonder like how valuable that stuff is, right? Because I believe like the core art could appear on multiple NFTs. It's just how the background appearance of that art is. So I don't know. That's one of those things that's like a big mystery to me. I do know there was a very like small, tight-knit Million Arthur community who did like live events and things like that for that stuff. And the Million Arthur aesthetics, this is specifically based off the web series visually, was a very appealing aesthetic for a lot of people. And I think that visual style is more iconic for Million Arthur than even the traditional Million Arthur series. Those little like weird, like, I don't know, potato looking characters who have these big eyes and like very expressive things. Like even the shutdown notice for this game has Usada, the like bunny girl, and she's like this little bean basically, and she's got these sunglasses on. And it just looks like weird and silly and cute, but it's a very, that artist, that lines up with what that artist does. So anyways, it is the end of an era. I think October 2021 is, I think, what one of these articles said was when this project launched initially. So we are here at the end of this. Technically, your NFTs still have value, but I don't know what that means in the context of Million Arthur. So Million Arthur was the only NFT I ever considered buying because one of them was a picture of a character burning a pile of money. And I was like, that would be a very funny NFT to own. Like literally burning money. And I think it was $5 to buy it. And I went to do it. But Line, who is the service who was running this initially, region locked the purchases. So I couldn't purchase it without going through too much effort. So anyways. I'll be curious. I talk all the time about like, oh, maybe this is like the last year we talk about NFTs. I do feel like things are coming to a close very slowly. Technically, Symbiogenesis has another like 2 to 3 chapters, but also I don't know what we will get out of further Symbiogenesis stories this year. So, anyways. Now that everybody has left due to the NFT story, it's time for Game of the Year. See, the real fans are the ones who stick past the NFT story. So yeah, we have a handful of different categories. I reached out to people for categories as well, so we have some submissions there. Some of these people had like multiple submissions, and just so you know, in case I wasn't clear about this, but I'm trying my best, is your submissions, if I may not be able to answer them directly, but I'll find ways to answer them. For example, this first one we have is from Dated Shadoff, which if you are on this podcast, One Control Report, may not sound like a familiar name. However, he is a part of the PCFX fan club community. And he, I think someday I'd like to have him on Hot Pot Gaming, but I need to figure out the angle of bringing him on because he's like a hobbyist programmer kind of guy, and he's got an interesting background. So, anyways, point being, he gave three questions, and I feel like only 2 of these I have an answer for, and only one of them probably I can actually do like Game of the Year stuff for. So the first one was most gratuitous, use of swearing in a serious work. I'll be honest with you, I don't know of any game this year that maybe I played that had swearing. I guess the Shining Blade fan translation, which was machine translated, has a lot of very foul language unintentionally. A lot of sexual language, actually. It's very strange, but it's in there. But I guess that, but a machine did that, not a person. So I don't know if that really is that interesting. So the next question here, though. So I'm gonna pass on that one, David. Sorry. The next question, though, I think is an interesting topic, but I don't know if I have a specific answer for it. Shortest lifespan on shelves, and you could say. There's a couple ways to look at this because I think his intention, he said no contest really. I think what he's talking about is Concord. I don't know if I need to go over the Concord story here. But if the Love Live game was this year, that might be the shortest game on shelves maybe. I don't know. That may have lasted a month. But that game was announced and shut down at the exact same time. It was crazy. It was literally like the same tweet. It was like, we are launching the game and we're shutting it down. It's crazy. I don't know if that was this year or not, but anyways, but I guess if we're going to compare those two, I like the Love Live story more. But I don't remember if that was this year, but I think the bigger thing I wanted to ask, and I'm going to kind of change this a little bit, and maybe this is technically a Game of the Year category here, is maybe what is the biggest question about Concord, right? What is the biggest lesson to be learned about Concord, right? And I'll be honest with you, I don't have the answer to that. I don't think there's a lot for me to say here. If you don't know, Concord is a PlayStation 5 first-person shooter that came out and was on the shelves for a few weeks as a Sony published game, and Sony seemed to really be trying hard to hype it up, but just really never caught on, and they basically were like, well, this is an online-only game, and we don't have a player base to support this online-only game. So they basically just like shut it down and refunded everybody. And I think my biggest question would be, which of these things are the most influential on like why Concord failed, right? Because I think the thing I saw most mentioned was characters. When you look at the Concord characters, people would say they are not interesting looking. I don't know how to define that, right? I think Concord characters there's something visually distinct about them. However, they're somehow incredibly generic at the exact same time. And I could not tell you exactly what that would be. So was it the characters? Like, did that game live or die by the characters? Is it the gameplay? Mechanically, it looked like a traditional kind of like, I think 5v5 shooter kind of thing. Or was it the fact that it was just live service and there's not a lot of space for that, right? Like, what were the things that so misaligned that game with the audience in a way that like, we made this video game that was like cost millions and millions of dollars and yet nobody wanted it. I don't know which of those questions are the real answer. And the answer is probably a combination, but like which one is like maybe the primary thing to fix first and foremost. And I don't know what that is. Because, character wise, I feel like I've seen games with the more generic characters than that. Gameplay wise, I feel like I've seen games that are successful that have more like that kind of style of gameplay, and nothing about it looked particularly wrong in that game. And then live service wise, there's a lot of live service games out there, so that do succeed. So I don't know. I think my point too would be the characters, but I don't again know why those characters failed, because when I look at Overwatch characters or Valorant characters, I would probably put them in a similar camp. League of Legends characters. Holy crap, I do not like how League of Legends characters look. I don't know. To me, the untrained eye of that kind of esport hero shooter kind of thing, like the characters looked about right. So, I don't know. I'm probably missing something there. But, I like anime aesthetics more than I like that Western kind of character design typically. So, at least from games from that category kind of thing. So, anyways, thank you, David, for that. But the real thing we're going to answer, David. so this, David, you gave the question of most improved remake of a classic video game on a modern system, or worst travesty. I have a few games that I think can kind of fit into this. However, I'm kind of have to explain some of these because I think people are probably not going to be super knowledgeable about these. So, I have Chaos Rings, Luigi's Mansion 2. Chaos Rings, basically, I played the PlayStation Vita version of that game, which is like an enhanced version of the original iOS version, which didn't have voice acting, and visually it's also kind of, I think, dressed up a little bit too. Despite it not being like a full remake, I think they kind of enhanced it quite a bit. Luigi's Mansion 2 on the Nintendo Switch. That is the port of the 3DS game, and visually it looks really nice. Storybook Workshop. This is a Konami storybook game. It's going to probably come up a lot tonight, so I'm sorry. I'm going to try my best to explain this. We'll talk about it on the podcast next year, I'm sure. But this is a storybook reading game from Konami with very cute and distinct art, very Konami-style art in general, of just like that kind of like Bimani brand kind of characters. And apparently that was a PC game initially that got ported to the Wii, and I played the Wii version of it, but they kind of changed it a little bit. And then also I have Phantasy Star Online version 2. I played that version 1 and version 2 this year. Version 2 added the shortcut window, which I made a whole video about kind of thing, right? And then we have Tappy Tappy Arcade. This is a Dojin game where you're a little tapioca ball and you go around a stage. The original version of the game was called Tappy Tappy. And then they released Tappy Tappy Arcade, which added a new level. And then also they added at the last level, they added an alpaca at the end. So when you get to the end of the stage, there's a little alpaca sitting there staring at you as you go up the final ledge. And then finally, Kira Kira Music Night is the kind of I would say expansion pack, even though it's a separate game for Kira Kira Music Hour from last year. That's that like Games for Girl dancing game by Hugh Nex that has a lot of like really nice presentation and stuff like that. So all these games are technically like reworkings of previous games. So that's kind of what I categorize these as. And I think out of all of these, I'm thinking about what are the improvements that are seen. And I feel like, look, I made a whole video about Phantasy Star Online version 2 and the shortcut window and how important it is. So I think that kind of wins by default. But I will say, I think Chaos Rings voice acting, really big deal. So I think Chaos Rings is like a runner up there in adding that voice acting for all those scenes and stuff. And then finally, one other thing about Tappy Tappy Arcade is it added a gradual scoring system. So instead of just getting, so when you take your tapioca ball and you roll it through the level to put it in your bubble tea, basically, and the longer you roll, the more your tapioca ball takes damage. So you want the least amount of damage on your tapioca ball, and you have to choose the best like way to go about getting to the bubble tea to put the tapioca ball in there. And in the original version, they just rated your tastiness when you got there. But in Tappy Tappy Arcade, they changed the scoring system, so there's a more dynamic scoring system. So if you were to be slightly better than last time, you would get a score that would reflect that. So I think that's really good. So Phantasy Star Online version 2 is the winner of most improved remake of a classic game, although we kind of changed that again. Chaos Rings being a nice follow-up with the voice acting, and then also Tappy Tappy Arcade with its dynamic scoring system kind of thing. So thank you to that category. This next category is one I created here. I'm calling it neat art moment. So I think a lot of times, and I don't remember my previous years, we have like neat aesthetics for games. And I feel like a lot of times we focus too much on how does the total overall game look at times. So I wanted to find particular moments in a game and highlight those particular moments that do something aesthetically interesting kind of thing. There's a couple different cases where these are like more longer term things, but I think generally I'm trying to focus on individual integrations of these moments kind of thing. So for example, Spider-Man 2's title screen on the DS. Spider-Man 2 on the DS has a cityscape. It's largely like kind of like 2D backgrounds, and it has this like very foreboding sky with this like music that's very foreboding in general. It creates a really good atmosphere. But there's a really nice touch of, it's New York City, so I think there's like train cars and stuff in New York City. Right? I don't know New York City. It's some kind of city, and there's a public transportation system. I think Spider-Man takes place in New York City. So what they do is they have little pixels that go through the city to represent train cars kind of thing. I thought that was like really cute. And I think it was a really effective way to like pull off this little train car system. It really adds to the atmosphere and breathes life to what is otherwise a static environment. And also cars. The cars have little front lights and back lights. So there's white ones for the cars coming towards you, and there's red ones for the cars going further away, kind of thing. Thinking about it, I think the tram is like a 2D sprite that goes around, where the lights on the car is what I'm thinking of. Sorry, I'm getting myself mixed up here. The lights on the car specifically is what I'm looking at here. I think it's a really effective use of these pixels to create a very busy looking environment without a lot of extra assets and things like that. I also have the Storybook Workshop Me integration here. Storybook Workshop, again, a bunch of like children's stories, but with a lot of art from Konami, and they kind of like you can put your me in the story, and they just kind of dump their head on, and they have like different, me expressions and stuff. It looks like a pretty official Nintendo style integration of me's, which I really like. If you ever played Tomodachi Collection or Tomodachi Life, if you can think of any time they just like stamped a me face into something, this game is very much doing that, but in different story book kind of things, like Little Red Riding Hood, you'll have your me face stamped in there, or some things like that. So not all stories in Storybook Workshop has that me integration, but when it's there, Thumbelina is another one. When it's there, it looks really cute and fun, and they also edit the dialogue to match your me that's in there. So like in the case of Thumbelina, they'll change it to, and my me's name is Akulian, so it's Thumbakulian kind of thing. So it's a cute little integration with that kind of thing. So Mobile Suit Gundam has like these little character portraits that appear when you blow up other Gundams. So it's like very morbid, but they like scream and talk at you. And then when they die, they like are on fire and screaming as they die. It's kind of awful, but in some ways that's like what that game visually I think does very well. And I love that little, like, for a game that aesthetically is like a very like PSP looking PS2 game. I think it's like a really nice touch with that kind of thing. So. And lastly, 007 Quantum of Solace. So Quantum of Solace on the Wii specifically. As far as I'm aware, all versions of the Quantum of Solace have a scene where James Bond is drugged. And so he needs to get out of the casino to get to his car because his heart's going to stop. So it's like a defibrillator kind of thing, right? And in Quantum of Solace on the Wii, they add a lot of like these really nice effects that like basically darken Bond's field of view. It's like warping the screen, and like part of this is also how it feels to move around that environment, because it is very difficult to move around. And I think the Wii remote, being a first-person shooter on the Wii, it's a little clumsy in how the camera moves. So I think it really adds to that kind of like drug sequence where you're just like trying to stumble your way through these hallways and stuff as you're like trying to get around people who are in the way, and like sometimes you can't really tell where you are, and so you're like trying to figure out like, where am I going? Where's this door? And things like that. It's like a really nice visual effect, and it's all in one stage. And unfortunately, looking at the other versions of the game, I don't think they pull it off nearly as well as the Wii version of the game does, despite the Wii version of that game having a lot of problems otherwise. But anyways, so those are the ones I have listed here. I'm going to say, okay, which one of these are going to win? I think Gundam is cute. I'm going to put that towards the bottom of the list, though. No, you know what? Storybook Workshop. I think the Me integration in Storybook Workshop looked very similar to Nintendo integration. So while it's very impressive that Konami was able to pull off something that looked very similar, I don't know if that is like uniquely interesting to me. So we're going to push that one off here, and we're going to choose our winner and 2 runner-ups. Oh, man. So I think Mobile Suit Gundam is a clear like nomination, not the winner. So I'm really looking at the Spider-Man 2 title screen here with the little car like pixels and stuff, and the 007 Quantum of Solace drug scene. Oh, man. I kind of appreciate Spider-Man 2 for how unnecessary it was, because they didn't have to do that. Also, I think that moment in particular, it's a very specific moment. Like, just looking at that title screen, it's like, chances are you won't actually look at it very long. Oh, man. Ooh, this is tough. Like, I think both do a really good job of, like, establishing an atmosphere. And in the case of the 007 one, there's like a really good like background, like modified version of the voices as you're walking through the hallways, and people are like talking, and it's all like blah blah blah. And then you're like driving your car, and the lady who talks to Bond is like, "Push the button, James. Push the down button," or something like that. And I do like it. It's a nice setup. I think 007 Quantum of Solace, the drug scene, wins. I know drug scenes are in other video games like Far Cry and stuff like that. I just like how this looks. I think it did a really good job. Yeah. So I think 007 Quantum of Solace is our neatest art moment of the year, with Spider-Man 2's title screen on the DS specifically, following up behind that, and Mobile Suit Gundam's character portraits of the dying people being the follow-up from there. It's a weird way to put it, but I mean, that's how it is. So this next one is a submitted one from somebody else. That is Panray. I hope I pronounced that right. Panray's been commenting a lot on the YouTube videos. I appreciate you, Panray, for commenting over there. That's helpful. It's good to know your thoughts always. I appreciate it. Panray wants to know, and this is actually kind of a tough one. He said, games that made you reflect on yourself or had a deeper impact. Now, obviously, every year I'm not necessarily going to have like a moment for these games, or maybe I won't be aware that I've had these moments until much later when I'm trying to think about stuff in a different way, and I get like a different like a game will return to my mind, and then I realize, oh, this game like changed how I think about these kind of things. But I'd say these games that I'm gonna say now are the games that maybe had the biggest impact on me. I'm going to not include Final Fantasy XI, because I feel like Final Fantasy XI stayed with me all this year. And I also feel like Final Fantasy XI is a game I'm still actively thinking about and needing to put that on paper at some point. And I just don't think it's really fair, because it just absorbs so much time. But I think these are the big ones. Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, I think this is in combination with other fighting games like Blade Arcus and SNK Heroines. I think it made me realize that like the auto combo stuff in those games is a really liberating thing. Like when I played Street Fighter 6 last year, I didn't want it because I felt like I'd lose control. And I think part of the problem with Street Fighter 6 is I'm familiar with Street Fighter, so I like had a hard time kind of breaking away from like what I knew Street Fighter controlled like. Where Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, I really didn't have any concept for how Grand Blue Fantasy Versus controlled. And I think it's nice that the default of it is that kind of 3-hit combo system where whenever you press the button, it's always going to do a 3-hit combo. And then you can choose your like specials from there. Because like you don't necessarily do a full combo. It's not like Dragon Ball Fighter Z where like the game's just like, yeah, you're going to do some crazy stuff by just smashing the button. It's not like that. But it gives you space to breathe. And I think Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, I don't know if other fighting games have done this in a way that is balanced in the way that Grand Blue Fantasy Versus is, but I think Grand Blue Fantasy Versus finds that perfect balance between control and breathing. And I think that made me realize like a lot of things about fighting games, like being able to sit down and play that game made me realize a lot of things about fighting games in particular. Some of those things are good and some of those things are bad. I think it did help me recognize just like how essential community stuff is for fighting games. In a way that I think is maybe overly reliant on that kind of stuff. But I think some of that's just modern gaming. When I think about, I think Final Fantasy XI, I'm thinking about a lot is like, I wonder at what point do like the developers just rely on people creating their own wikis and stuff, and they can just be like, yeah, we'll just throw some obscure garbage in the game because most of the players are just going to go find the wiki listing for somebody. So it's like, oh yeah, we can set this rule in Grand Blue Fantasy Versus, and somebody's going to go and like, you know, sit in training mode and then make a whole wiki about like how this thing interacts with this other thing. And I just like, I kind of don't like that, but you know, whatever. That's not the point of this. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. This is the adventure game. I think what Grand Blue Fantasy Relink made me do, it made me go back and revisit how I looked at Nier Automata, and being like the problem with Relink is that like it's like everything about it is a very nitpicky experience for me, where like I will nitpick everything and I can't find why I don't like Relink. And I think if you asked me about, like, if you said that to me about Nier Automata at the time, I don't know if I could have told you that that was happening. Where I feel like with Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, when I sat down and really thought about what I was experiencing and feeling while playing that game, I could sit there and see that like, oh, I don't know why I don't like this game, and so I'm just attacking everything, hoping that eventually I'll find that thing. So I think Grand Blue Fantasy Relink did a good job of helping me see that being a problem that I have. Monster High Ghoul Spirit. This is the Wii Monster High game. This game, oh god, I don't like this game. I wish I did. I like the aesthetics of Monster High quite a bit, actually. I think the problem I ran into in Monster High is that the game itself felt fairly, it feels like a game that exists just to be a game about Monster High. And I know for a lot of people that might be like, oh, that's like all licensed games. I don't think that's true. I feel like Monster High is a game that exists just to be sold as a Monster High game. But it made me kind of take a step back and ask, okay, well, if I view it as that, what could be viewed as like, how would like a kid playing this game view this? That like isn't Monster High. Because essentially what that game is doing, it is putting you in a Monster High environment with Monster High characters. Obviously, again, a lot of games do this, but I think Monster High, with the lack of any real gameplay functionality, aside from mini games kind of strewn about, is relying very heavily on you wanting to be in the Monster High world. And I had to like sit there and really think about when you have these Monster High characters in front of you and they're talking and like the voice clips and stuff, like how important are those things to somebody playing Monster High? And I don't know if I got an answer to that, because at the end of the day, I don't know who enjoyed this game or why they enjoyed this game. But it made me kind of recognize a little bit more about the power of like the potential power. It made me think about the potential power of characters alone. I think that's one thing with mobile games a lot these days, is people making purchasing decisions solely based on a character. Especially, and that's got God. You know what's related to Monster High Ghoul Spirit? Crypto. When we're looking at the what's it called game, the Coin Musume game, the game where you're like investing in the different girls and stuff, like real money into girls. And it's just like, I wonder like how much of this is like investing in these characters versus actual real investment. And like from a company perspective, like what is the value that you're trying to present to somebody? Are you actually trying to present them the value of investing? Are you trying to present them the value of investing in a character that you like, right? Like I feel like that game is maybe the most condensed version of Monster High, might be the most condensed version of, I just want to see this character on screen and go, yes, that's Vampira or whatever her name is, right? And I think that game really challenged like my ability to recognize what's good in a game and like what a game is for and like what a purpose of the game is. And I think lastly, a storybook workshop. Not storybook workshop, sorry. I had that on this list here. I'm not going to talk about it. I was thinking about what I was going to say, and I don't think it actually makes a lot of sense. Game Builder Garage for the Switch. I recently sat down and played that, and it is not... In some ways, it's very good that I played it now. In some ways, it's bad that I didn't play it sooner, because I was working on that Nintendo video, and the script is basically done. But I think Game Builder Garage finally unlocked, like, in my head, what the value set behind Breath of the Wild is, and what the value set behind Animal Crossing New Horizons is. And they're these games that I think have over time transformed into experiences that are made in ways for players to kind of express themselves through how they interact with the game, right? I mean, this is like, I think, a very Minecraft style thing. Like, you know, here's this game, and then you like how you interact with that world is formed by you, and maybe in some ways Grand Theft Auto, which is something I've always struggled with, to be clear. And so it makes sense that I'd struggle with it. But Game Builder Garage, while not necessarily those types of experiences, I think it highly condensed that in a way and also separated that from an existing franchise in a way that made me go like, hey, this is... I can see the value that Nintendo has in terms of like helping the players express themselves. And part of this is because of the game's dialogue. So this game, if you don't know, Game Builder Garage is like a game maker kind of thing, but on the Switch. And so there's these little characters called nodons who interact with the game. So like there's these little functions in the game world. So if you're like, hey, I want, gravity to be set to 1 or 2 or 3 in the world, so it changes how like your character move around. There's a character associated with that function, and they can talk and things like that. And I feel like this game, I think, does a really good job of through that dialogue, kind of messaging how important it is for you to like be able to modify this world in the way you want to, and trying to encourage you to do that and things like that. So I think Game Builder Garage kind of did a lot for me in terms of like being a very key part of the Nintendo Switch puzzle piece and like why the software is on the Switch the way it is. That's not to say that's true for everybody, but I think Breath of the Wild specifically, in particular, I think benefited the most from me playing Game Builder Garage. And I haven't played Breath of the Wild since, but it makes me wonder if Tears of the Kingdom, now that I've played Game Builder Garage and like kind of better understand the value set of what's going on there, if I could go to Tears of the Kingdom and enjoy that better now. So the game, so the ones that, the game of the year in that category, sorry, I'm like trying to explain these things in depth, and hopefully this podcast won't go on too long. We do have quite a bit left. I would say the fighting game stuff was a big deal, but it's more of like that was built up over time kind of thing. Monster High Ghoul Spirit, I think, was a little more sudden and out of nowhere. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, that's like very connected to me as a creator and like needing to communicate. That's very important. Oh god, all of these are really important. This is gonna be a hard category to narrow down. Let me start by cutting out one. As much as I think fighting games are like really fascinating to look at this year, I don't think it's so much of a personal story as much as it is a story of other people. So Ponray's asking about what games made me reflect on myself, and I don't feel like that fits there. So we're going to take out Grand Blue Fantasy Versus and fighting games in general. Monster High School Spirit's an interesting case of me not being able to find an objective when I play a game, like what I want out of a game, but being able to imagine it in a way that I think I understand it, and I'm able to like apply it to other things in the world. But I don't necessarily know if I ever really found what I was looking for in Ghoul Spirit to give me evidence of that. So I think we'll set that in runner-up category. Game Builder Garage feels a lot more direct, as so does Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. And I'll say this, as much as Game Builder Garage was a revelation to me about what the Switch is, Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is probably the game that is more directly involved with me as a person and like what I want to be doing with communication and how I talk about games and how considerate I am or am not to games, ideally towards games. So I'm going to say Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is the game that made me reflect on myself the most this year, with the runner-ups being Game Builder Garage and Monster High Ghoul Spirit. That's our categories there. All right. Most disappointing game. Okay, I've been dreading this all year because I've been playing a lot of games that have very much disappointed me, and I didn't end up including all of them, but there are a lot of them here. The ones we've already talked about a bit, Monster High Ghoul Spirit. I think that's the only real one that we've talked about so far. Monster High Ghoul Spirit is a game I already talked about, so I think we could just kind of put that on the list here and not worry about it. The other one we've talked about a lot on the podcast is Zensis Rainforest. Zensis is a game about relieving stress from yourself, and I would not say the game has been very good at relieving stress. And the game is also horribly buggy and crashes and stuff. So Zensis is not a game that I would say it was stress relieving at all. And I don't know. The trailer for Zensis is significantly better than the game Zensis, and I think the game does not support what they're trying to sell, in my opinion. Even though it's like probably an okay puzzle game at worst, but I think the stress release aspect of the game, in my opinion, does not manifest in a meaningful way. My Japanese coach is sad in that, like, the game does not feel built, like the engine that powers the My Insert Your Language Here Coach series from Ubisoft does not feel capable of supporting Japanese very well. I think the concepts behind what you need to learn in Japanese and how you need to learn them don't get applied in a very good way. And so there's a lot of weird stuff in there where it's like, oh, what's the katakana for te or something like that, and then they like aren't showing you the katakana for te because they're like, we're not showing you katakana yet, and so it's like select te, and then you select te, and the question's te, and it's like it doesn't really make any sense because it's all in English Romaji characters, right? And so it's weird. It's just like I think it just like it was the most shoved into a pre-existing formula thing, and just like the game doesn't feel modified in order to really excel in helping the player learn Japanese, in my opinion. There's just a lot of issues with My Japanese Coach as a whole. Shining Blade. This is the PSP Shining game that's like built on the Valkyria Chronicles engine. I thought this game was okay in just about every way. I don't think there's anything bad about it, but I don't think there's anything great about it either. Which MediaVision seems to tend to do very well, unfortunately. So, Luigi's Mansion 2 HD. That is a game that I don't remember what I said about it, but I feel like the identity of that game was really weak. And when I say that, I think it's because Luigi's Mansion 1 has a very strong identity, and Luigi's Mansion 2 feels like it is kind of like a weird mishmash between this old game with an identity and the modern Mario universe, and then also not really giving that game the ability to stand out on its own. I would say overall the game is good, but I feel like overall it doesn't add anything to what Luigi's Mansion is, and that disappointed me a bit. I just guess, I don't know, I feel like Luigi's Mansion 1 was just like such an interesting and creative endeavor. And Luigi's Mansion 2 feels like, how can we polish this up without really asking questions of like, what does a modern Luigi's Mansion look like beyond just making it feel better? I will say that original Luigi's Mansion, way rougher than I remember for sure when I went back and played it, but I think there's a lot of things that I much prefer about the original one as just like as a new video game kind of thing. Back 4 Blood. This is the spiritual successor to Left 4 Dead. It's one of those cases where, like, maybe similar to Luigi's Mansion, on paper, Back 4 Blood is a better game than Left 4 Dead, because it has a lot of interesting stuff on paper that help diversify the experience, make it much more replayable, and all that stuff. This is like that 4-player zombie co-op shooter kind of thing. But everything in it somehow doesn't come together. It's a good game on paper, but the execution, I don't think, succeeds in creating an interesting experience. So, Left 4 Dead was a very good game that I enjoyed. And I think Back 4 Blood was a okay game that I could play through. And then, unfortunately, my friend group wanted to play through it on a harder difficulty, which I don't think improved the game. So a little bit, maybe more of a negative feeling towards that. And the last thing is Yoshi Topsy Turvy. I don't know how Yoshi Topsy Turvy came out. The idea there is interesting because that's the gyro GBA Yoshi game where you like tilt the GBA around and Yoshi, the screen itself tilts. So it's kind of interesting because like Yoshi is always oriented with the way the screen's oriented towards you. So it's a very interesting visual experience, but mechanically very little happens in that game that's good or interesting. So what's the most disappointing out of those, though? Zensis for sure is on this list. I think Zensis was like such a cool idea, being like a stress relief game, and I don't think it succeeded in any way. Shining Blade. I don't know what the problem with Shining Blade is. I mean, I know what the problem is, but I don't know. Is it the most disappointing? It's like totally okay. I don't know. It is maybe the least interesting integration of Valkyria Chronicles engine onto an RPG that you can maybe do, I feel like. Is it worse than the rest of this stuff? Maybe not. Were my expectations higher for Shining Blade than the rest of this stuff? I think so. I think my expectations of Shining Blade were higher, and that's why it's maybe so disappointing. So maybe that's it. This is just the biggest gap in expectations and reality kind of thing. The last one's going to be Monster High Ghoul Spirit here. So we got Zensis, Shining Blade, and Monster High Ghoul Spirit. I think Zensis wins. I think I just really wanted like some really cool, relaxing puzzle game, and I feel like everything in that game fails at doing that. And I feel like the core of the game's idea should have been that, and should have at least touched on that a little bit. I don't think it succeeded. So Shining Blade, again, nothing necessarily wrong with it. It's just I don't think it does anything interesting. And Monster High Ghoul Spirit is a game that obviously I didn't have the highest expectations for, but I've played enough games for girls that I expect a little bit more out of a game like that, I think. So that's that. All right. Zensis is the winner of that category, with the other two being runners-up. Joseph has a question that I don't necessarily know if I'm going to have a lot to say for this. Joseph, you said, given what you cover, maybe a newly fan-translated game of the year. Now, Boku no Natsu Yasumi came out last year. So really what we're looking at is 3 games. And one of these games, arguable, I didn't really play it. Shining Blade, which I have played. Team Innocent. And Welcome to Piacare. If you don't know, Team Innocent got a fan translation that's been put out now. It's a beta version, but it's pretty dang close to playable. However, I have not really played it that much. I did testing more than anything, so I haven't sat down and played the final version. So I don't really know. Welcome to Piacare. It's the other PCFX fan translation I've been meaning to play for a long time, and I sat down and played that this year. And I unfortunately didn't talk about it on the podcast really at all. I think it's going to be saved for the PCFX Fan Club podcast. But yeah, so I played that, and then Shining Blade. So in saying that, there's not a lot of options to choose from there, and one of them I didn't even really play. So we're probably looking primarily at Shining Blade and Welcome to Piacare. So if I talk about like a quality perspective, probably Welcome to Piacare, since Shining Blade is like a large chunk of it's machine translated, and then Team Innocent I haven't really played. So I guess in that sense, probably Welcome to Piacare. But let's say in the sense of game, let's say this. Since I didn't play a lot of this, which of these 3 games am I most thankful got translated? And this might be controversial if you're a PCFX fan. Team Innocent is a game that I think I enjoyed primarily almost to its fullest without knowing the language. There's a lot of things about it that obviously I learned through the translation, but largely, from what I've seen, again, I haven't played through all of it, it lines up with my expectation of what was going on. Welcome to Piacare would be really, well, I say that, but like First Kiss Story, I sat down and really played. I think Welcome to Piacare would be very hard for me to enjoy as much as I did without a translation, because I think Welcome to Piacare, unfortunately, just is overlapping with a lot of my First Kiss Story experience in a lot of different ways. We'll talk about it more on the PCFX Fan Club podcast, but so I guess Shining Blade. Shining Blade's the one I wanted most out of this list, probably. Probably I'd get the most benefit from. It created a nightmare Shining scenario with me, which we'll get into later. But yeah, Shining Blade's the winner, with the follow-ups being Team Innocent and Welcome to Piacare. Of most wanted, I guess, fan translation that happened. Again, in terms of actual quality, I'd say the Welcome to Piacare translation, as somebody who has played that, beats Shining Blade at least. Shining Blade is definitely like thrown together. Here you go. I appreciate the work of whoever did it still, but it is like primarily machine translated and a mess because of that. Thank you, Joseph. Best character or characters. I don't actually know how I want to present this. There's a handful here. Chaos Rings cast. I think the Chaos Rings cast is amazing. This is that game where it is like a romantic partner game where the romantic partners are like in a death game kind of thing. And you go through like multiple timelines and you better understand each of these characters and how they interact with each other. And I think what I like about Chaos Rings a lot with its characters is that the relationships feel complicated. They feel complicated in a way that I think feel meaningful. And I think also I like that the relationships you see from the outside don't represent what the actual relationships are when you actually play those characters. And I think it does a very good job of presenting that in a way that it feels effective and not super in your face. So I appreciate that. Chaos Rings, I think overall narratively has a lot of fun stuff going on, but it is kind of like that multi-universe kind of stuff. So it kind of gets out there, but I think the characters themselves hold that game down. So I think they play a huge role in why Chaos Rings is good. Nodons and Game Builder Garage, I think those characters are really fun because they really try to embody a function of programming. And so each character has like little dialogue quirks that I think are really creative and interesting, and they help kind of emphasize to you of like what this function is for, because they talk in certain ways. And so you're like, oh, this is the character that does this kind of thing. I think that's really fun with Game Builder Garage with that. Evil from Kira Kira Music Night. I love me a delinquent little like piece of shit character in a game for girl. And Evil is a character who really wants to be the music queen of the night and is kind of a jerk because of it. But in the end, Evil is just fine with everybody. She's just as misunderstood, technically, maybe. I don't know. She's kind of a bully. But I like Evil from Kira Kira Music Night. She's the main character of Kira Kira Music Night. That's kind of the whole gimmick of that game, is that the first one, you're Gabby. The second one, you're Evil. Or Elvira is her U.S. name, but Evil. I like that the box art for the Japanese one, because I have the one with the little character in the packaging. It says Evil inside. I really enjoy that. Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff. So this is that little gambling game with like little dapper characters, like top hats and stuff. And each character has their own personality and how they play the game. And they also have little dialogue bits, and they have a little bit of voice acting too. And so like I love it when the little bunny and stuff gets all like fed up with you trying to like guess what color he is, because that game's about guessing like certain colors that the player's playing on. The whole game's about bluffing, hence the Royal Bluff. So you're trying to bluff what you're trying to do, and how you score is by getting a certain point of number of colors. You have to like pretend you're trying to get certain colors to kind of bluff out other players. And so like I like it when you'll be like you'll try to call out the color, and they'll just be like, I'm trying to remember exactly how the workflow goes, but it basically is like, your character goes, I think you're blue. And then the little character on the other side, the little bunny, will either like be sad and be like, oh, ho, ho, you got me. Or they'll do like a little snide thing and be like, you thought you got me, kind of thing. I'm doing a terrible job representing it, but I thought it was like really fun, and like each character feels like they represent their play style, because the whole game is about reading the other characters, about bluffing, and how you do that with AI. I think it's a very challenging thing, right? So you have to kind of read what each character is trying to do, and when they assign like specific character portraits and personalities to these characters, I think it's a little easier to read their bluff in a way that's very, very fun. So I think that's really important there. I have a couple here for Wild Hearts, the Fisherman. I like the Fisherman and Wild Hearts, but I don't really have a lot to say about that. And then in Shining Blade, I like Yukihime and Misty a lot. But I would say at the end of the day, I don't like love them. I just like them in the context of that game. So I think we're going to put that aside. So we're really looking at Chaos Rings, Game Builder Garage's Nodons. I'm going to remove Evil Elvira from Kira Kira Music Hour. This, unfortunately, we are doing a dirty to it, because if you don't remember, Kira Kira Pop Princess, is that what it's called? I don't really use this name for the first game. We talked about that last year, and so it feels kind of like redundant to do this again with Kira Kira. But technically, I played Kira Kira Music Night at the beginning of this year, because I played them back to back, but over the course of the holiday. So. And then we'll put the, so we got the Nodons, we got the, I got, that, and then we get the picture book game, the Royal Bluff. Okay, sorry, I had to remind myself what we chose out here. So, so I think one thing that's going to be challenging here is that Game Builder's Garage, Nodons, and Picture Book Bluffs, the Royal Bluff, those characters are expressive in a way that's like integrated into their gameplay, which I think is very, very, very cool. Chaos Rings, I love the characters in Chaos Rings. However, it is more just like a traditional story kind of thing. This hurts me this hurts me. I think Chaos Rings is going to be a runner-up, I think. Because, like, the characters in Chaos Rings are really good. Oh my god, they're so good. Oh. Because, like, when I think about picture book games, The Royal Bluff, and Game Builder Garage, those individual characters on their own are not strong. But in the context of the game itself and what the characters are doing, they are very strong. They are like functional characters in a lot of ways. And like in some ways, I think I'm more impressed by that than Chaos Rings just from a storytelling perspective. Ooh, this is going to be really tough. All these are very good because when I think about Game Builder Garage, that's like teaching somebody how to program through characters, and characters are really important for that. When I think about picture book games, The Royal Bluff, it's taking something that would be very challenging to do against AI, and I think like really enhancing that feeling of playing against somebody that you have to try to read on the other side. And so like I think that's like really effective, and they're like enjoyable characters. I love them a lot. And they have little goofy little bits of dialogue with voice acting and stuff. It's very light, but it's a DSiWare game. And Chaos Rings. I think in the context of it just being a really tight race here, I think Chaos Rings got to go down. I think Chaos Rings, as much as I love it, is a very normal use of characters, where Game Builder Garage and Picture Book Games does something very unique with those characters. So I'm going to push that down. It's a runner-up still. Thank you, Chaos Rings. I love you. Kiss you. Man. So here's part of the problem. I think I like Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff, better as a video game, but I like Game Builder Garage's integration of characters probably better at the end of the day. Well, let me say this. I'm thinking about this. Sometimes Game Builder Garage, the characters can talk too much. And I'm just like, please be quiet. I just want to put down this one thing. And they're like sitting there talking about how they make the retry thing happen. And it's like, I just want to put down the retry thing because I remember. So sometimes I feel like it's a little too redundant in that way. Since we're splitting hairs, we're gonna do that as a split hair. The best characters of this year are Picture Book Games, the Royal Bluffs characters, with Game Builder Garage Nodons being a runner-up, with Chaos Rings right behind that. Thank you so much, Picture Book Games, the Royal Bluff. What a beautiful video game that you can't buy anymore. So you should check it out, though. However you do that. We have a question here, or a segment here from, we have him as Antho Boy. We'll get into that. I had a dream a very long time ago with Anthony, and it was like when YouTube first started happening, and I in my dream, he was saying, "What's up, Antho Boys?" in his YouTube video. That did not actually, he's never had a YouTube account, but I think of Antho Boy a lot because of that. So anyways, best dialogue category. So the best game dialogue. We're looking at three things here. One is Chaos Rings again. The next follow-up is Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff. A little bit of an overlap here. And then Kira Kira Music Night. If you don't remember the Kira Kira Pop Princess franchise, has very, very, very fun, cute, and spunky dialogue. And I think part of it, I mean, this is a Games for Girls thing in general, but part of Kira Kira Pop Princess is the characters are very much expressive along with that. And so that's where like the dialogue, I think, comes into play with that, where like the dialogue matches the energy of the scene and the characters moving around in like a very unique way compared to other Games for Girls, I feel like. But let me think about this. Chaos Rings dialogue is like the raw dialogue of Chaos Rings good. And I think we're not going to do Nodons here because I think Nodons, like I mentioned earlier, have a little bit of trouble with like being a little too wordy. So I think that kind of defeats the purpose of it being on this list. Is Chaos Rings dialogue good? I think so. I think Chaos Rings has very good dialogue. So we'll leave that. There's only 3 games in this one, so all these are going to be Game of the Year or runner-up. Picture Book Games, I love the dialogue and the quips, but I don't think that the dialogue, I mean, it's important, don't get me wrong, but I think the important part of the dialogue is to enhance those characters for the bluffing part. And I think that the characters themselves probably play a bigger role. So I think that'll be a runner-up. And Kira Kira Music Night, again, I do love Kira Kira, but we also had Kira Kira last year, so I feel appropriate. So Chaos Ring wins Best Game Dialogue category. Woo! Thank you, Anthem Boy. All right, the next category, Most Surprising Game. We have, once again, Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff, Game Builder Garage, Spider-Man 2 for the DS. Spider-Man 2 for the DS, the reason why that was kind of surprising is there's a lot of mechanical depth to Spider-Man 2 on the DS. The game is not built for it, but that's not the purpose of this category. We're not talking about whether it's successful or not. I just was surprised by what was in Spider-Man 2. Storybook Workshop for the Wii. I think Storybook Workshop is really interesting. I had no idea it existed, and I think it's like a really interesting test from not test, like I don't know, like it's an interesting concept on the Wii specifically. And then the other ones here we haven't really talked too much about yet, so let me go deeper into those. Dynasty Warriors for the PSP. Dynasty Warriors for the PSP has a lot of problems, but I think what was most impressive about Dynasty Warriors for the PSP is that I think it was very successful at creating a portable Dynasty Warriors game and implementing kind of the flow and pace that it needs to work as a portable game. I thought that was really impressive in a way that I wasn't really expecting to be impressed. I was expecting the PSP Dynasty Warrior games to just kind of be like the PS2 games, and I feel like Dynasty Warriors did a good job of adapting that in a way I never expected that it. I mean, I never expected it, but I wouldn't expect to have done that. Inichi no Tatsujin. This is the summer festival game on the Wii, which I did play during the summer, actually, at the end of the summer, I think. This game, I think, just showed Bandai Namco had a really strong sense early on the system of like what was going on in terms of like, it basically was a very like Wii Sports like experience. There are some things fundamentally about the game that it did not succeed at in terms of, I think, creating that Wii Sports experience, but the core ideas of the like controller movements and stuff, I think were probably Bandai Namco's best attempt to creating that very like your hand is in the game kind of experience that the early Wii had, that I think was really cool. I think I wasn't really expecting that. Most minigame collections on the Wii, I don't expect to execute as well as something like a Wii Sports. And I think Inichi no Tatsujin doesn't quite get there, but it gets pretty dang close in a way that I don't know if I've seen any other non-Nintendo publisher do. Shashin Go, this is a vocabulary learning game for Japanese on PC. I don't know if I actually want this in this category. I think I'm going to take that one out. I lied. I'm going to take it out. I don't know if I was most surprised by that game. It's an interesting game, though. Then Alex Rider Stormbreaker. This is a DS, like almost like UK Bond kind of kids thing. And the game itself, I think, does a really great job of replicating that like summer movie flick kind of pace to it in video game form. And I think it just was like very aware of the kind of game it is and stuff. And that was something I wasn't really expecting. So the game that surprised me most this year, what are the three? I'm going to say Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff, absolutely. I would have never thought that game was as interesting as it was. Game Builder Garage, I think, was a really big thing as well. I think I was not expecting Game Builder Garage to be as well made as it is. And I think Storybook Workshop on the Wii, the presentation of that game is by far, I don't know, by far best is the right word. It is well beyond what I expected a presentation for a game like that to be. It is essentially a digital storybook, but I think it looks amazing. And the game in general just has like a really solid sense of identity to how it looks. I think there's like a couple of few exceptions, but most of the stories look very, very cool and very good. And I think that's like a really enjoyable way to consume those stories. So, all right, so those are the three. I would say Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff takes the cake on this. I think that game is just like super, like came out of nowhere for me. And I partly because somebody asked me to go record footage for it. And I was just like, okay, even like looking at what it was, I didn't think it'd be that interesting. Then I played it and was like, holy crap, this is super interesting. So I think that's going to win, with the most surprising game runner-ups being Game Builder Garage and Storybook Workshop. Vink sent this category, which is best sequel to a series originally on the Famicom Disk System. Now, Vink is trying to bait out a Famicom Detective Club slot here, and unfortunately, I think the biggest thing about Famicom Detective Club with me was me being like, "Hey, I don't think I care about this franchise." Again, there's nothing wrong with it. I don't know why I would care about it at this point, other than a good game. But, if you know me, a good game does not necessarily line up with things. I think a long time ago, I was really interested into like a Nintendo trivia kind of thing. But I think now I have a little bit harder time. That's okay. I'd be very clear. That doesn't mean I wouldn't like it if I played it. There's a very good chance I would like it if I play it, but I haven't given it the time of day. Anyways, so Vink, there's your category for you for that. I'm going to modify it to best sequel or spiritual successor. I've got 4 games on this list: Sanctum 2, Luigi's Mansion 2, Spider-Man 2. Technically, I did play the original Spider-Man, but the DS one is very different than the original Spider-Man on GameCube. And then Back 4 Blood. And I'm going to say this is a pretty weak category. I don't think any of these games really scream out to me that much. I think Sanctum 2 is maybe one of the better ones. Sanctum 2 takes a lot of core ideas from Sanctum. It's a tower defense shooter with multiplayer, and it creates some interesting situations with characters having more unique skills and things like that. I think they also did a lot better job of improving the tower balance, so different towers in the game have different strengths in the way the original Sanctum didn't do a very good job of. So we'll talk about Sanctum 2 at some point next year, I'm sure. Otherwise, behind that, I say Spider-Man 2 on the DS. It's probably not best per se, but I enjoyed it. And then I'd say I enjoyed Back 4 Blood more than Luigi's Mansion 2. I think Back 4 Blood is doing more unique things than Luigi's Mansion 2. I might take that back. This actually might be harder. What would be the nominated one? Sanctum 2 just wins. I can tell you that. So we're looking at the nomination now, which is Spider-Man 2, and then the last one's either going to be Back 4 Blood or Luigi's Mansion 2. Gosh, when I think about the games I enjoyed, so that's the thing. It's like Luigi's Mansion 2 is like a little more disappointing to me. I think Back 4 Blood I didn't necessarily expect to enjoy it as much as Left 4 Dead when I just looked at it. But Luigi's Mansion 2 I looked at, I was like, oh, this could be good. And then I played and was like, oh, I don't like this that much. So it's like, I'd say both are a similar quality, but my expectations for Luigi's Mansion 2 is higher, which I think puts it feeling lower. I'd say let's just go with that. Back 4 Blood is the nominated third slot, but I think it's a weak category in general in terms of just my options for that. Not you, Vink. You're not weak. I changed it because I couldn't answer your question, Vink, but I appreciate it. Vink, I'm sure you could answer your own question in terms of the best sequel to the series originally on the Famicom Disk System. So, best quality game. Now, this is basically games that I think are just like really solid from every angle. Presentation, mechanically, I think just like a well-rounded kind of game, right? First I have on here is Wild Hearts. This is the Monster Hunter style game from Koei Tecmo and EA. There's a lot to love about this game. I think it's a really well-made Monster Hunter style game. It's got a lot of unique game mechanics that I think are really cool. It takes the building of something like a Fortnite and integrates it into like a Monster Hunter. And while it is the core concept of how like building works, or Fortnite did not invent the idea of building, but it doesn't feel like a Fortnite in terms of building, but it does feel in terms of the snappiness of what a Fortnite building looks like. And I think what they do is like basically simplified it down to like a bunch of like different combination of these like wood barriers and things like that you can kind of change into different weapons and things like that. It's pretty cool. But overall, I think the game's just like really well made overall. It's just really well like polished in terms of the gameplays and stuff. The weakest part, I will say, the story. The story feels like it's just not quite there. Storybook Workshop. I think presentation-wise, Storybook Workshop is a great-looking game. We already kind of talked about that. I'd say the weakest thing in Storybook Workshop is probably the lack of interactivity. I think there really should probably be a little bit more interactivity from the player, kind of thing. So, but still, incredibly high-quality storybook game on your Wii. Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff. This is a DSiWare game, so there's not a lot presentation-wise, but I think it does a lot of great things with this presentation. Maybe the one criticism I'd have is in multiplayer mode. I don't know if this is bad. Like, it can be really hard to keep track of who's doing what because the characters are not as emphasized in multiplayer. That's kind of like the one bad thing. Otherwise, everything else about it is great. Grand Blue Fantasy Relink. As much as I hate on this game, it's very solid in a lot of other ways, visually, mechanically. I think the problem with Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is not the quality of it. I think there are design decisions I don't like about it. But however, as we have talked about earlier, I don't necessarily know why I don't like Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, but I will nitpick every little thing here and there that probably shouldn't matter. I think it's a very well-made game overall. I think it's very well-rounded, and I think that's why it's on this list, because this is not necessarily about favorites here. It's about what I think is like a really high-quality game. The last one being Kira Kira Music Night. Kira Kira Music Night, I think out of all the games for girls I've played, the Kira Kira franchise is one of the most solid games you can play. I think it has a good amount of challenge. Kira Kira Music Night in particular, I think has a very good level of difficulty, and it gives you the ability to choose that difficulty from the start. So I think there's a lot of opportunity for you to find a level of this game that's going to work for you. And the presentation, everything, again, top-notch presentation. Like, it's very solid. Okay, so this is kind of tough. I am not going to exclude Kira Kira Music Night from this one because I don't feel like we had this discussion last year. I could be wrong. I'm going to put Kira Kira Music Night in here for the top 3. I'm going to say Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff also falls into here. I think Wild Hearts narratively is weak enough that I don't want it on this list. Storybook Workshop, I think the interactive nature is weak enough that I don't want it on this list. So I think Grand Blue Fantasy Relink is going to show up here because I don't have like a great excuse for why it can't show up. My bias, despite my bias, it's showing up on this list. I'm going to say, oh God, this is tough. I think Grand Blue Fantasy Relink, I can safely say, is a runner-up in this category. I think a lot of that just comes from my personal taste, but this is my personal category. But, you know, game quality, I think we are a bit separated from that. And I think just because the game has more hardware to work with or like more budget to work with doesn't necessarily put it above what these other games are doing. I think we're thinking about this in the context of what, you know, Picture Book Games as a DSiWare game doesn't have a lot to work with. So it's more about the context of what a DSiWare game can do, right? Nintendo OG maybe being the best example of something like that. But same developers, actually. But Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff specifically, I think that's the winner of this category. I think Picture Book Games Royal Bluff is the winner. It's a little bit of a shorter game, but I think it's really well made overall. Kira Kira Music Night is, I think, a good runner-up behind that. So, okay, cool. Best quality Picture Book Games, The Royal Bluff. Zero submitted this last one, or not last one, but the last one that I have from somebody else. And then we have one more category, and then we have Game of the Year. Zero's category is most irrational purchase of a game. So this is basically a game that I probably shouldn't have bought, I think is the kind of the context behind this. So I went through the games I bought this year, and I made a list of games. I'm not going to go too deep into these, especially because I haven't played a lot of them. So I'm just going to talk about why I should maybe have not bought them. Satisfaction Rocked the Runway is a Wii game I've never seen before. The art on the box is something that I liked how it looked. The gameplay on the bag did not look particularly good. So it's one of those situations where I am basically purchasing this game based off the art on the front of the box being slightly in my favor. So I think that's maybe a flimsy reason to buy it. I'm open to it being good. And I guess the fact that it's games for girls immediately puts some level of interest on my plate for it. So there's that. Demon Bride Diary. I bought this from Vink. I don't necessarily think I thought this one through very well. I think, again, box was cute. But in the case of this one, I think the game is like a weird scheduling game. And the idea of me trying to sit down and navigate that in Japanese seems like a very poor thought out thing. So Shining Tears, I bought this. And the reason why I think it's a weird, irrational choice is because I would say every Shining game I've played so far, 2 of them, Blade and Resonance, and I watched got through most of the anime for Shining Hearts. I would say have been okay at best, like good enough for an RPG a lot of times. That doesn't mean there's bad. It means that they're like not amazing. And I bought Shining Tears for some reason, but I think I bought it almost exclusively for curiosity of the lore, because Shining Force Exa was a lot more in line of like what I'd want out of a video game. But Shining Tears, as far as I can tell, is kind of the source origin of the Shining Blade story arc, which starts with Tears, goes into Winds, and then gets into Hearts, and then goes into Blade, I think arc, and I think that's it. I think that's the end of the line. So, I could be wrong. I don't know the Shining lore. This is basically a lore purchase. I'm curious about the Shining lore, basically. Shape Boxing. I don't remember why I bought Shape Boxing. I mean, I like Extra games. I think what happened was I was researching an Extra game on the Wii. And I wasn't sure what this was, but I had stumbled across, I think, the English version of it, if I recall correctly. I'm vaguely recalling this. Maybe I have the Japanese version. I'm not 100% sure. I'm looking at this. It is... Oh, maybe I have the Japanese version of Shape Boxing, but it's called Cardio Workout in the US, I think. Yeah. So I have the Japanese version of this. I probably should have bought Cardio Workout. Gold's Gym's Cardio Workout. I would need to look to see how similar they are or aren't. I think Extra Gaming is cool, but I already have a number of games like this. Another example of this is I bought Super Swing Golf Season 2. This hasn't shown up on the pickups video yet, but I bought this. Oh, apparently the case is ripped a little bit. And not the art, but like the plastic, so that's easy to fix. But I have like 4 golf games on the Wii, so the reason why I picked this up is because the Pangya series seems interesting, but I already have Super Swing Golf 1 that I've never played, so buying Super Swing Golf Season 2 doesn't seem like a smart choice. Similar thing with Hot Shot Tennis, Get a Grip. I've never played the Hot Shot series. I don't know the appeal of the Hot Shot series. However, I have a Hunex tennis game, and I should probably play that first and foremost, so I don't know why picking up Hot Shot Tennis seemed like a good idea. Another example is My Dream Home for the PlayStation. This is a home designing game, but it's in Japanese, so I haven't sat down to try to figure out if it's something I can play. But I feel like there's probably other home designing games I probably could have done. The only reason I bought this is because it was a PS1 game at a convention in Japanese where you design a home, and I thought the idea was kind of interesting. And then the last one's Chocobo Stallion. I thought the concept was very bizarre that they've made a Chocobo horse racing derby game, but then I found out, well, I didn't find out. I know it's what it is. It's a horse racing derby game, and I don't know how to play those. So I think that was maybe another one. So those are the most irrational purchases that I would say, all right, I kind of identified. I think out of those, Super Swing Golf Season 2, I have so many golf games. I feel like Shape Boxing kind of fits a similar point of that, though. So I kind of don't want it on here. I think Shape Boxing and Super Swing Golf Season 2 should probably fit in a similar category there. I'm going to put Shining Tears on here because I don't know. I guess I am curious about the Shining Tears Shining lore. So I guess that is like something. I think it's silly that I keep buying Shining games which keep turning out to be totally okay RPGs with very generic plots and like characters that I think are kind of fun but not like super exciting or memorable. Yet I continue to buy these. I don't know. I could be spending my time on just about anything else RPG wise, and I'm just like, but why are there so many of these Shining games, and why are they connected? Oh man, this is actually tough. We're gonna put Shining Tears on there. I think it's silly that I bought it. I should be focusing on other RPGs. And then let's put Demon Bride on there. It's one of those like Japanese purchases that like I bought it because it's like an interesting looking Japanese game, but like in no way will I probably be able to play it anytime soon. So why did I pick this up? So yeah, I'm gonna put Shining Tears as the most irrational purchase of the year. And then we'll have Super Swing Golf Season 2 as the follow-up alongside Demon Bride Diary. I think the Japanese name is like Oniyomi Nikki is what it is. Thank you again, Zara, for that category. The second to last category, Best Barely a Game. We have 3 games on here. Storybook Workshop. I think the Japanese name for this other game is Conan, the Mystery of Shapes and Numbers, which is a Sega Bina game. And then Shashingo, which is a Japanese vocab learning game on PC. These games have interactive elements. They could probably call them a video game. But I think the video game aspect of it are kind of sidelined by some other main priority, but the video games are used to enhance it. I would say Shashingo is probably the winner out of that category. I think Shashingo is really interesting because it's kind of like, in some ways, makes like vocab learning like a first-person shooter, depending on how you play it. There's different ways you can play it. You can use it as like a cozy game where you're like sitting there and like taking pictures and putting filters on it, or you can be like me and you're like trying to like headshot a loaf of bread from across the level to be like, that's pawn, and you take that picture and then like hope that no car drives in front of you while you take the picture. And so it's like this weird like action-oriented vocab game that I think is really cool. Storybook Workshop. I mean, both of these are runners up in this category because I don't have anything else in here. We technically did play some Bourbon Metaverse this year, but it was kind of the follow-up to us like previously looking at Bourbon Metaverse. So, I'm going to, there's some things I like about Conan's Shape and Numbers, but I think Storybook Workshop is the game I'll remember longer. So I'm going to put that above there. So both of them are what's it called? Where you like mentioned, I forget. I've said it already a bunch of times in this and now I'm just forgetting. Glorious Mentions. We're going to call it that. The Glorious Mentions, but Shashingo is the actual best barely a game of the year. Nominations? I don't know. Game of the Year. We got a handful of games here. We got Storybook Workshop, Wild Hearts, Picture Book Games, Chaos Rings, Inichi no Tatsujin, Kira Kira Music Night, and Alex Rider Stormbreaker. I'm not missing something. I feel like something's missing from that list. Let me just skim through my games again real quick and just make sure I'm not missing anything. All right, I think that's good. Oh, man. All right. So we've talked about all these games, I think, a decent amount already. Is there anything that I feel like needs to be fleshed out a little bit more? I don't think so. I think all these we've kind of talked about to the extent that I'd like to talk about them. So let's start ranking these a little bit. I might need to rank these a little bit more in depth because we are like trying to pick out. I think Picture Book Games, the Royal Bluff, is at least in the top 3. Let me put that up there. Wild Hearts is very good. I know we haven't like talked. I don't think it's won anything tonight, but Wild Hearts is a very good video game that I do like mechanically. It is the best modern video game I've probably played in a very long time. I'm going to put that up there for now. We'll see how it feels. So we got Picture Book Games and Wild Hearts in the top 3 right now. That really leaves room for one more if these all feel right. I think Kira Kira Music Night, I'm okay setting aside, given we talked about Kira Kira Pop Princess last year, and they're essentially the same video game, so it doesn't really do a ton to stand on its own separately. I'm really enjoying Storybook Workshop, but mechanically, I feel like Storybook Workshop doesn't have enough going on as like an interactive experience to really set it up there in that Game of the Year category for me. Chaos Rings, I love the narrative. I love the concept. I think the gameplay mechanics in the game, which is like essentially Media Vision loves doing this, where they have like paired characters. The core concepts there are really cool. Just the execution is just not quite there, unfortunately. I'm going to put that at the bottom, but as like a temporary third. I just want to feel how that feels. Inichi no Tatsujin, like I said earlier, I think it is one of the closest games I've ever seen come to that like Wii Sports moment on the Wii when it comes to feeling like you are doing something in the game itself. There are some structural issues with that game in terms of keeping the player engaged in these mini games in a more dynamic way where you're kind of jumping around between different games. And Wii Sports has this a little bit too, I will say, where like playing one of these games long term doesn't really make a lot of sense. So it makes more sense as like a party game that you just kind of jump around, right? So, but I do really like the idea of it a lot. Alex Rider Stormbreaker. Do you have a place up here, Alex Rider Stormbreaker? I love Alex Rider Stormbreaker. I love that it exists. I don't think it's going to fit in this category, unfortunately. I'm going to move it down. I would feel comfortable with Chaos Rings or Anichi no Tatsujin being in the slot. Does Storybook Workshop make it into the top 3? There's a lot of things I love about that. Did we talk about this already? I just think the interactivity is not quite there. I think we said that already. Okay, so that's out there. So we're looking at 4. I think Picture Book Games and Wild Hearts are a lock. Chaos Rings and Anichi no Tatsujin are very close follow-ups. I think it's interesting because Chaos Rings is a game that is mostly about narrative in terms of why it's on this list. And Anichi no Tatsujin is a game mostly about mechanics in terms of why it's on this list. Well, I can safely say probably one of these two will be runner-ups and not the winner. It's tough because like the reason I like these games are very different. I will say this. I think mechanically Chaos Rings, even though it doesn't get where it needs to go, you can see little touches of it. So even though I think mechanically the game is very flawed, I'm going to move that up there. Okay. So Chaos Rings is the runner-up. So we got Chaos Rings in there. So that's going to leave either Wild Hearts or Picture Book Games, the Royal Bluff being the game of the year. As much as I enjoy Wild Hearts, I think Picture Book Games, the Royal Bluff is one of the best games I've played in a very long time. So I think Picture Book Games, the Royal Bluff for the DSi is our game of the year 2024. Yeah, woo, my voice is cracking. Sorry. Well, there we go. Another year, another game on the top. I think, what was it last year? I think, what did we do? I had a last minute upsearch. Hackhawks was last year. We threw Hackhawks on the list. So apparently I love these like puzzle games kind of thing. Picture Book Games is a very good game. I really like that game a lot. I'm really glad it won Game of the Year for 2024. So here we are. Wild Hearts is great. Unfortunately, I don't think Wild Hearts won anything. I think if there's a best mechanics category, Wild Hearts may have won that category. But Wild Hearts is a very good game. And I hope if you guys ever want to check it out, you can. So anyways, that's that. Thank you again for coming. Thank you again for listening to One Control Report all this year. Again, new schedule. Mondays, first Monday of the month will be Hot Pot Gaming. And then the third Monday of every month, we'll do an episode of the show. Again, I'm open to feedback on those things. So feel free to let me know how you feel about that. I will, there's a good chance I won't be able, well, let me say this. Don't tell me how you feel about there just being less episodes, right? Tell me how you feel about the new episode when you see it, and let me know what you think of it. Because I think it's going to be a little bit different than usual. So save your feedback for that, because the reason I'm doing this is not because I think there's something wrong with the One Control Board podcast. It is literally down to I don't have time to continue to do some of these things, or the prioritization needs to be changed at the very least, and so I focus on other things. So we'll see. So anyways, let me know how you feel about that when that time comes on the 3rd week of January. So anyways, thank you guys again for coming this year. Thank you again for listening. Thank you again, Demo Dory and Conspicuous Snoop for donating. Who else donated this year? I didn't pull up the list. I probably should have done that. Let me see all time. Can I get a list of people who donated for all time? Demo Dory, again, thank you for this month, especially Demo Dory. Mega Mint, thank you for donating this year. Who else we got on here? Fireweed, thank you for donating this year. Technically that's December, but thank you again, Fireweed, for your donation and all that stuff. So thank you for all of you guys for supporting me. I'll try to use up that money here somewhat soon. And Conspicuous Snoop, if I didn't say that. So anyways, appreciate it. I'm going to go. My voice is burnt out again, so I'm going to stop talking right now. But thank you guys again. Should it be tradition that we end every year with Daddy's Angry? I feel like we should. Congratulations. Welcome to the Daddy Angry Zone.
I know today my dad, he has a birthday, but yesterday we argued and argued.